So when someone is getting treatment, we want them to get treatment all the time. I want to talk a little bit about specific diagnoses that really don't require ongoing treatment and what we would use instead of that, or what we would recommend doing with treatment. And so a few of them stand out. For example, like if you're an amputee and you've been an amputee for 2 years, I mean, you don't really need to go to unless you have other stuff going on. Right. But for your amputations, there's not a whole lot of ongoing treatment for that. So usually we would say try to go to your doctor every couple of months, tell them what's going on, yada yada. But with an amputee, I mean, I am still an amputee, and then 5 months later, I'm still an amputee, yeah. And so what do we tell those clients?
Yeah, that's come up before. It's a good question, and we've talked about it a little bit before, but mostly it was some of the lifelong mental health conditions, like a learning disorder, autism, intellectual deficits, stuff like that, or like a traumatic brain injury. You had a motorcycle wreck when you're 19, you're 50. Now, you still had a motorcycle wreck with a traumatic brain injury when you're 19, so there's still going to be some residual problems. With an amputee with more physical limitations, we have to get it documented, first of all. So we would probably go back and get the records to when the amputation happened. And what Social Security is really going to be looking at for an amputee specifically is if they're wearing a prosthesis, if the prosthesis is fitting. That seems to be the big thing. It does take some time to get a prosthesis properly fit, so it's not hurting the area where it fits to, stuff like that. And then there are going to be some instances where you just can't. I mean, there's not.
Yeah.
They can't fit you with one. And you're right. After that, do you need to go to the health department, every 90 days to say, yeah, he still doesn't have a leg, or no, he still doesn't have an arm. It sounds funny, but it's not. And no, the answer is no. I mean, if it's there. However, we would need some kind of documentation from an ongoing source that you're having problems because of it. And sadly, the only way to provide that would be medical records. So would you, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth here. Would you need to go to the health department? You had an amputation 2 years ago. You got a prosthesis that fits okay, or you have a prosthesis and you tried and it's just not working, and therefore you're either hobbling around, or if it's an arm or a hand, you're trying to learn how to work one-handed. Not work, but work your life.
Yeah.
From a one-handed standpoint. Really, the only acceptable records that Social Security would look at would be a medical provider. And it seems kind of silly. And like I said, I find myself speaking out of both sides of my mouth. No, that's stupid. You don't need to go to somebody to say, yep, they still have an amputation. Okay, well, not for that reason you don't need to go, but you do need to go for you to say, just a document, listen, I can't get from one end of my house to the other. I have to hug a wall, or I can't make a simple meal anymore because, I'm missing an arm, especially if it was a dominant arm. I'm right-handed, and that's, I had a right below elbow amputation. That's going to cause some significant problems. Just the improvement from the time of the amputation until you get some therapy, and again, if they try to do a prosthetic and it just didn't happen, there's just going to be a pretty significant amount of time that passes, and eventually you're going to be like, I don't want to go to the doctor for them to basically tell me, hey, we told you, 9 months ago when you were in here that we've done all we can. And of course, from Social Security standpoint, all they want is just some kind of documentation that you're still having problems. So I'm giving two different answers. Do you medically need to do that to verify that the condition that you say you have exists? No. No, you don't. But do you need to go? Yeah, you probably still need to go, just for them to document. Mr. Smith came in today, and we did a below elbow amputation on him in November of 2023, and blah 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 blah. And he's still complaining of not having the ability to do just simple tasks, getting a bowl out of a cabinet, all sorts of stuff like that. So that would help. Another physical one that comes up is seizures and headaches, migraines. What we see normally in these is that, especially if it's a traumatic onset of seizures, which that happens sometimes. You live your life, and at 43 years old, you have the first seizure, and then 2 weeks later you have another one. What we find mostly is seizure disorders. They put you on an anticonvulsant, Dilantin, Tegretol. There's a ton of them.
Yeah, Keppra.
Kepra's a big one,
Yeah.
and the thing is that 95% of cases with a seizure disorder, you're going to respond well to treatment. The only treatment that Social Security is going to be looking for in that, if you have a seizure disorder, is they want to know periodically what your blood levels are, because if the Keppra, the Tegretol, the Dilantin, whatever you're taking, if it is not at therapeutic levels, then they're not going to allow your case. They're going to say, well, if dude was taking his medicine like he's supposed to, and if it got up to therapeutic levels, but he's still having seizures, so you're not really going in so much for treatment, because a lot of times what happens is you go to treatment and you go to the ER and you amass a stupid bill, because every time you go to the ER, you amass a stupid bill, stupid expensive, and you just stop doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, your family's like, oh my goodness, look at him, he's zoning out again. Or if it's like a grand mal seizure, which is the big one, that you're flopping, you're actually on the floor. After they've seen that happen a few times, what they're probably going to do is they're probably going to stick their hand in your mouth to make sure you don't swallow your tongue, and they're just going to wait it out until you stop convulsing and stuff like that. You're not going to go to the ER every single time you have a seizure. You are not, after a while, going to go to the ER every single time you have a migraine that, they'll give you a shot usually of some, something to help you. It's usually some kind of narcotic, but, and that helps you, but you've amassed a stupid expensive ER bill.
Yeah.
And if you're having them frequently enough, I'm not going to mess with it. I'll do what I normally do, which is I retreat into a quiet, dark, cool place, and I stay there until it goes away. And so back to our question, do you need medical evidence to show that, you've continued to have 3 migraine headaches a week, or 5 migraine headaches a month, or 5 seizures a month? No, you don't need medical records to show that. But with the seizures, you're going to need to show some blood work periodically that you are taking the anticonvulsants and they are at therapeutic levels, but you're still having seizures. And for migraines, we suggest that our clients do a diary. And I'm talking about writing a book or becoming Shakespeare. I'm just saying a notebook, a piece of paper, a small notebook that you have just somewhere that you always keep it. And, it's March 7th, had a seizure, did the normal stuff to get rid of it. And then somewhere in that diary, the normal stuff, 3 hours, laying down, eyes closed, lights off, curtains drawn, making sure nobody in the house is making any noise. He's doing that several times a month. And you have a diary of that, and we actually present it to Social Security. Well, listen, they're not going to go to the ER every time because it's not practical for one, and financially they just can't do it. If you're expecting them to go to the ER every time they have a seizure when they're having 5 of them a month, that's not going to happen. It's not realistic for Social Security to expect that, and therefore we're not going to play that game. It's not realistic for me. I have 5 migraines a month. They keep me out of pocket for 3 hours at a time. Sometimes the recovery takes as long as a day. I'll just make a diary of that. It's not reasonable for you to expect me to go and amass a stupid, expensive ER bill for them to give me a shot. I'm going to get the same kind of remedy, but I'm just not going to get it as quickly as a shot, and I'm not going to amass, a $500 or more bill doing it several times a month. So again, I find myself speaking out of both sides of my mouth. You always need medical records to prove a condition, but I don't expect it to be unreasonable. So I guess that's my dual answer to the question.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to be able to work a case without any kind of evidence.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily need to be this intense, every month with a specialist and every month with this guy and every month with this provider. But we have to have some piece of evidence. And I would imagine the ADL is also super important for those type of cases.
Absolutely.
If you're an amputee, use your example of, say it's their dominant limb, their dominant arm or hand. Social Security will send the client an ADL, an activity of daily living, and that's your opportunity to talk about, I have trouble doing laundry because of this amputation, and I have trouble doing washing dishes and folding laundry and sweeping, and
Sure, yeah.
I can't go to the grocery store by myself, stuff like that. I would imagine that's extremely important for all cases, but especially
Absolutely.
something like an amputation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, upper extremity involvement, the ADL, you're going to have problems doing things that people with both limbs, both upper extremities still have. And there's going to be a long and arduous learning curve. Mm-hmm. If you're 50-something years old and you've had both limbs all 50 years, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, you have to have, one of them removed, there's the trauma. But then there's that learning period of doing things one-handed, lower limb. There's that learning period of balancing, of learning what you can't do. Certain things that, there's the obvious things like, okay, well, they're going to have difficulties walking, getting around and stuff like that. Yeah, try to get in and out of a car without both legs.
Yeah.
If you're watching this video, just try to do that. You're watching this video, and I won't get gross and crude. If you're watching this video, tomorrow morning, try to do your morning hygiene ritual, showering, bathing, cleaning, brushing your teeth. Try to do all that with your non-dominant arm. And your dominant arm, you don't get to use at all. Try to do that. And you will see how absolutely horribly hard it is.
Yeah.
And it's not something that you overcome in a week or a month. It's, you're basically, your body's been doing something for decades, and all of a sudden you're telling it, I can't do that anymore. You're going to have to do it a different way. We are really fantastically adaptable creatures, but we don't adapt quickly.
Yeah, it'll take some time.
Yeah.
If you have a question about your disability case, give us a call at 615-453-9151 Monday through Friday, or click the link in the description of this video.